Hey YouTube. So in the last video, we finished creating some configuration for Waybar to use it in Hyprland. Today I want to look a little bit deeper into Hyprland configuration. I want to configure Hyprland completely within Nix, so we can share the configuration between different machines, and the Hyprland configuration is part of the system configuration. As you might remember, in one of the last videos, I just copied over the config file from my main machine. And today I want to show you how to use Home Manager to make the Hyprland configuration part of the Nix flake we have been building in the last couple of videos. So let's get started. When we have a look at the Home Manager options, you can see that there are multiple options for Hyprland, and the one I'm interested in here is the Hyprland settings, because that's basically the part of our NixOS configuration that will replace the config file we have right now. So just for now, I will create a new file in our desktop folder and call this one hyprland.nix. Just for now, I will just build out a very simple configuration. So I will enable Hyprland on the Home Manager configuration with Wayland Window Manager Hyprland enable equals true. And save this one. We need to import it here. As we already have a Hyprland configuration on our virtual machine from one of our last videos, I will just download this one just to this repository so I have access to it. And here we have the regular Hyprland configuration. And in order to have this working within our Nix configuration, we need to translate the config file into Nix expressions. So when we go back to the Hyprland options here and into the settings, here we have an example. And I will just copy this one. And of course, we could just go through the complete file and make it one by one, but we live in the day and age of AI, so we can have this a little bit easier. So I will just prompt AI here to translate the file for me. So I will just write a prompt here, please transform this Hyprland config file into Nix as in this example, and then I just give it the example, and now AI will start working for me. And just for comparison here, it's still writing. Okay, now we are finished. And as you can see, the different parts of the configurations have been transformed into Nix expressions here. So I will just approve this. And just remove the old parts. And now I can just go to my hyprland.nix file and put in settings here and just paste the contents that have been created by AI. And here we miss a semicolon. Save this one. So transforming the configuration with AI is indeed very helpful. This goes much faster than doing it manually yourself, but AI is not perfect. And the example I have given to the AI from the Home Manager example was very small. So I will just try to push it over to my virtual machine. And we will have a look. And here it starts complaining that the attribute name is missing. And that's actually here where we are at the device part. So that's basically the part where I have configured my keyboard. So I will just take this one out for now. And here I get the same error because this refers to another device. In this case, it is the mouse settings here. And for now, I will also take this one out. And now I'll try again. And now it starts building my configuration. And this will probably throw an error. The error is that we still have our Hyprland config file because Nix will not override an existing config file. So what we need to do now is we need to log into our virtual machine and we need to remove our Hyprland config. And now we try this again. And now it's building. And when we go back to our virtual machine, you can see Hyprland is starting, but we are getting some errors. So the errors we are seeing here are all about the environment variables. So we need to fix that on our configuration. And that's the part up here. And as you can see, this is valid Nix code, but let's have a look how Nix created our Hyprland configuration. So I will just open this in NeoVim. And here we have the problem. So when you look at this block here, we have the variable name and equals the value for the variable. And when we look this up on the Hyprland wiki, you can see the format for creating environment variables for Hyprland functions differently. So you need to set the env keyword, then equals the name of the variable, a comma, and then the value of the variable. So we need to fix that in our configuration. Right now we have key value pairs, and I will just change this one to a list of values. We make this into an array and we give it one variable declaration like in the Hyprland wiki after another, and just save this one and try again. And now when we are back at our virtual machine, you can see that the error message is gone. So what we have done now is we have completely moved our static Hyprland config file into our Nix configuration. When I have set this up the first time for myself, I had a couple of things I stumbled upon, so I will just share them and what my solutions were for this. So one thing that was not very straightforward to figure out was the per device input config from Hyprland. So when we have a look at the Hyprland wiki, we define input devices like this. So we have a device and each device needs to have a name, and underneath you put the values. So when we want to build this in our Nix configuration, one could assume that we just define it like the other parts of the configuration. So that we define a device, and for each device we define a name, and then we put configuration values underneath, how we could find it in the Hyprland wiki. But when I save this one now and try to rebuild it, I will get an error. And the problem is really that Nix will only accept the keyword once. So the Hyprland configuration demands a name for each device, but in Nix we can only use name as an attribute once. So we need to write this another way. And the way to fix this one here is to turn this into a list of devices, really. So what we can do here is we make it a list. So now we have a list of attribute sets, and when I save this one and try to send it over to my virtual machine, this will generate. And when I have a look at my configuration file, you can see I have both device definitions up here. So for now, this is a one-to-one translation of our Hyprland configuration file into our Nix configuration. That is already kind of useful. The way to make this more useful is, of course, to share parts of the configuration between different machines. So in my personal example, I have a laptop, I have server, and I have my main desktop. And especially when it comes to Hyprland, there are parts of the configuration that are really bound to the machine I am sitting on. So for example, on my desktop, I have my split keyboard, and on my laptop, I have the included keyboard of my laptop. And in order to not have multiple configurations that need to be maintained, we can use Nix to create a more dynamic configuration. So for instance, we had our hostname.nix file here where we configure all the features that we want to include into this specific machine. And what we can do here now is we can just add a per host configuration part down here. So we basically just build out parts of the Hyprland settings on the host level, and the part of the configuration that can be shared between all machines can be defined here on the features section. So for example, as I said, the devices are a part that is basically more machine specific. So I can just take it out here and move it into the host definition here. And the same, of course, I can do for monitor and workspace definitions here. So when I just save this one here and send the configuration over once more, and when I go back to our virtual machine and open the created configuration file once more, so we can just scroll down a little bit. And here you can see I have the monitor configuration I have used on my host file, and I also have the workspace configuration I have put over to my hosts file. But as I could see, there is still some overlap, so I think there's some workspace configuration here. So this one we can just take out because we can just do this per host. And now when I reload my configuration here, I have only the workspaces I have defined in my host file. And what I also would like to do is I would like to have the Hyprland as part of my feature sets here, so I can just enable and disable it. And what I need to do, of course, is to reflect the basic structure we have in the other feature sets also on the hyprland.nix file. So I will just copy this over from the wayland.nix and just rename it accordingly. And just name it Hyprland config. And I made a little mistake on the host file here. So this needs to be hyprland.enable. And now we rebuild our system. And when I head back to the virtual machine, just let me kill Hyprland here. And now we can just disable it for testing here and rebuild once more. And when we log back into our machine, Hyprland is of course still active because we have also included Hyprland on the system configuration level and not only on the user level. But as you can see, Hyprland is greeting us that we are using an auto-generated config. That basically means that there is no config file at all right now. So I can just head back here and enable it once more. And now I get an error for the home manager activation, because when I start up Hyprland without a config file, it will create a default config file. And that is, of course, in the way now to build our Hyprland configuration. So what I will just do now is just SSH into my virtual machine and remove the Hyprland configuration and exit, and now just rebuild again. And now we are back with a functioning configuration. As you can see, it's very straightforward to move your Hyprland configuration into your Nix configuration, so you have it as part of your system when it builds up. And we could also see that it's possible to include that into the feature sets we have built in the last couple of videos. Just some closing remarks on this topic. So, as you can see, in this way you can create a dynamic configuration for Hyprland and also reflect machine-specific settings. So you can use one flake configuration to configure multiple NixOS systems without replicating whole config files for Hyprland. And that's also very easy to maintain, really, because the way we have built it up right now is we have a base configuration we have configured in the feature set, and then we have a specialized configuration for monitors and devices and workspaces just on top of it. And that makes it really efficient to configure different scenarios. So that's it for this video, and in the next video I will go a little bit more into detail when it comes to dot files, because it doesn't always make sense to move any config files you are using into your Nix configuration. For example, when I have this editor here, I am using, this one is Z, and it also has a config file in my .config folder. But the problem is really each time I change a setting on the GUI, it will try to write to this file. And when I move this config file into my Nix configuration, this will be read-only, so the editor won't be able to write to it. And there are also other scenarios where it doesn't make sense to move a config file into Nix. So in the next video, I will show you different ways on how to include dot files into your home manager environment. So that's all from me today. Take care. Bye-bye.